Okay, so today we're going to be doing a deep dive into Foucault.
Yeah.
Gotta say, stuff can be a little, dense. But super fascinating, right? We're going to be looking at his book, Discipline and Punish. Ever really thought about how punishment, actually works?
Foucault's work, it really helps us see the things we think are normal in a whole new light. Not just about, history, but about understanding how power, operates on us in ways we don't even realize, even today.
Yeah, and we're looking specifically at his analysis of punishment in Western societies from around the 17th and 19th centuries.
Yeah.
And get this, prisons, not always the standard punishment we think they were. And public torture, way more going on there than just being cruel.
Right. It's true. With these gruesome public displays, Foucault argues that they served a different purpose. It wasn't just about punishment. It was a way to display the king's power for everyone to see.
Wild. It's completely different from how we think about punishment now. It's like they wanted to make an example out of people, but not just through fear, right? It was a whole, performance.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. Foucault calls this the transition from spectacle to discipline, public torture, executions. Think like theater meant to shock and awe. But then as we move into the modern period, punishment, it gets more hidden, more about institutions, like prisons, which are all about reshaping individuals, making them fit society's norms. It's definitely more subtle, but no less powerful.
And the source material actually, it gives this crazy description of the execution of Damiens in 1757. It's like they went full-on medieval torture on this guy.
Gruesome account, for sure. But Foucault uses it to show how public punishment, even after death, it reinforced the king's power over the body, and it did it in a very, very graphic way.
So wait, so you're saying that even our everyday habits now, like how we stand online or how we behave in a classroom, that could be a result of these subtle power dynamics that we've internalized over time?
Exactly. And this leads us to one of Foucault's most important concepts, the docile body. What he's saying is power. It doesn't just tell us what to do. It shapes our habits, our movements, even our posture.
Okay, so how does this docile body thing play out in real life?
Okay.
Give us an example.
Sure. Think about 18th century military drills. Foucault talks about how soldiers were trained, right? Like how to hold their rifles, how to stand, how to move in unison. It wasn't just about being uniform. It was about controlling their bodies down to the smallest detail to make them more obedient, more effective as a unit.
Wow. Okay, that makes you think about all the ways we're trained to behave, even in everyday life.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got these docile bodies, right? Primed for control. And then Foucault hits us with this concept of the panopticon.
So the panopticon, it was this prison designed by Jeremy Bentham, and the idea was the guards, they could see everything, but the prisoners, they never knew if they were being watched or not.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. So social media is like a modern panopticon. We're constantly censoring ourselves because we feel like we're being watched. Kind of creepy when you put it like that.
Right. And Foucault uses the panopticon to show how in modern society, we internalize this feeling of being watched. We start regulating our own behavior because we assume someone's always watching. There's this really chilling quote from Discipline and Punish that sums it up perfectly. The seeing machine was once a sort of dark room into which individuals spied. It has become a transparent building in which the exercise of power may be supervised by society as a whole.
It's like the internet in a nutshell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Social media, facial recognition. Are we ever really not being watched anymore? It really makes you wonder what this means for freedom, for resistance, if there's this unseen gaze always upon us.
And this leads us to another one of Foucault's kind of unsettling arguments. He suggests that prisons, they might actually create delinquency rather than just punish it.
Wait, so prisons actually make things worse. How does that work?
It seems kind of counterintuitive, I know. But Foucault argues that by labeling and isolating individuals as delinquent, the system actually creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Once you're labeled a criminal, you're treated differently by society, making it even harder to break free from that label. He actually uses the example of Pierre Rivière, this French peasant who killed several members of his family, and his published memoirs made him this cause célèbre in the 19th century.
Yeah.
And Foucault uses him to show how the lines between, criminal behavior and social rebellion can get blurred.
So we've gone from public hangings as a spectacle to this idea of prisons maybe making things worse. This is a lot to unpack. What does it all mean? Where do we go from here?
That's the question Foucault wants us to ask, right? If power is working on us in these really subtle, pervasive ways, if these systems, the systems we think are supposed to protect us, are actually shaping us, even our identities, then what does that even mean for freedom, for resistance?
That's a lot to think about. It's like this whole time there's this hidden script flipping through the pages of history, and Foucault is holding it up for us to see. But he doesn't give us all the answers, does he? Just leaves us with more questions. And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of this deep dive, exploring how Foucault links this idea of power to knowledge itself.
It's really interesting, how Foucault links power and knowledge. He argues they're not separate things, but actually intertwined.
Okay, hold on. Break that down for me. How does knowledge equal power, especially when we're talking about punishment?
Well, think back to those public executions, right? The power on display. Very raw. All about spectacle, brute force, knowledge. Not really the point.
Yeah.
But as we move into, the modern system of punishment, knowledge, it becomes crucial for control.
So instead of just like punishing the body, it's about studying it, understanding it. Is that what you mean by knowledge being power?
Yeah, precisely. Think about the rise of criminology, psychology, sociology. These fields pop up alongside the modern prison system, and they're all about trying to understand the criminal mind, right? Predict behavior, figure out how to reform individuals. And this type of knowledge, it gives those in power a new type of authority, the authority of expertise. It's not about the king's divine right anymore. It's about, those who claim this specialized knowledge about human behavior.
So the experts, they get to decide what's normal and what's deviant. And then they get to design these systems to fix the deviance. That's a pretty powerful position to be in.
That's it. That's a good way to put it. And Foucault, he points out how this power-knowledge dynamic, it plays out in all sorts of institutions, not just prisons, right? Like schools, hospitals, the military, even in the workplace.
So once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's everywhere. Who gets to decide what mental illness is? If having the power means you get to decide what's normal, that's a lot of weight on those definitions.
That's exactly it. That is what Foucault's getting at. Take the idea of mental illness, for example. What does it even mean to be mentally ill? Well, Foucault would say it's a category that's defined by those in power, right? By those who claim to have the knowledge to diagnose and treat these conditions. And of course, then those experts, they get to decide how to treat those so-called illnesses, which, as Foucault points out, often involves more control, more discipline, more ways to make those bodies more docile.
It's like this whole cycle where knowledge, it reinforces power, and then power shapes what we even consider to be knowledge in the first place. It feels kind of inescapable. So how do we resist if power and knowledge are so intertwined, if these systems are so, everywhere? What can we do?
Foucault, he believed that resistance is always possible. But it's not about, some huge revolution, overthrowing the system from the outside. It's about recognizing those subtle ways that power operates on us and finding ways to disrupt those mechanisms, to challenge the categories and definitions that have been put on us.
So more like guerrilla warfare.
Yeah.
Little acts of defiance that kind of chip away at the system from within. What would that even look like in real life?
Yeah. Think of it as questioning assumptions, challenging categories, refusing to be defined by those in power. Instead of just blindly following the schedule, maybe we start asking, why are things scheduled this way? Or instead of stressing about our performance reviews at work, maybe we focus on doing work that feels meaningful to us, even if it doesn't, fit the standard metrics of success. It's about finding those cracks in the system where we can assert our individuality, our own values, our own desires.
So it's about awareness, recognizing how these power dynamics are at play, so that we can make more conscious choices. But let's be real, these systems, they're powerful, they're everywhere. And a lot of us, we benefit from them. Whether we want to admit it or not, we all take part in these systems, even if we don't realize it.
You're totally right. And Foucault, he emphasizes that power isn't something that's just imposed from above, right? We all participate in these power dynamics, even if we don't realize it. And as you said, many of us, we benefit from them, which means we have a responsibility to really examine our own roles in these systems, even if it's uncomfortable.
Okay, so we're all caught up in this web of power. We're being shaped by it, but we're also shaping it with our choices, in our actions. It's a lot. But circling back to Foucault's insights on punishment specifically, what does this all mean for how we think about, the justice system today?
Well, Foucault's work, it challenges us to look beyond the surface, beyond the stated goals of the prison system, right? It encourages us to ask, what are the real effects of imprisonment? Who benefits from the system? And how does it contribute to these bigger patterns of social control?
Because let's be real, the justice system, it has problems. Mass incarceration, racial disparities. The list goes on.
Hmm.
Are you saying these issues are like directly related to what Foucault was talking about?
Well, what Foucault's work does is it provides a framework for understanding how these very real problems, they're connected to larger structures of power and knowledge. For example, he points out that the way we define and punish crime, it often has less to do with the actual harm that was done and more to do with like whose voices are being heard and whose behavior is seen as threatening to those in power.
So it's not just about like locking up bad guys. There's this whole other layer of social control happening that we need to be aware of. This is getting pretty deep.
Exactly, and that's what Foucault wants us to see. He's not saying we should just get rid of systems altogether, but he's urging us to be critical, to ask the tough questions, to think about the consequences of how power and knowledge, how they operate.
Okay, so we're supposed to think critically about the justice system, about power, about our own place in all of this. It's a lot to process. What's the takeaway for someone who's just trying to, I don't know, live their life, go to work, be a decent person?
You know, I think the key takeaway is don't take things for granted. Question assumptions. Be aware of the ways that power, how it operates, both on a large scale and in your own life. Like, notice those moments when you feel pressure to conform, when you're being categorized or judged, when your own needs, your desires are being, like, pushed aside.
Because knowledge is power, and the more we know, the more we can start to, like, challenge the status quo, resist those forces that are trying to control us, create a more just and humane world.
Exactly. And while that may sound idealistic, it all starts with that first step, awareness. Recognizing these dynamics it's essential if we want to create a world where power is shared more fairly and where individual freedom is truly valued.
Okay, that's a pretty good rallying cry. But before we get too carried away, I think we need to take a closer look at some of the specific ways these disciplinary techniques, how they show up in our everyday lives. And for that, we'll have to dive into. Okay, so we've talked about a lot, like a lot. Public executions, this idea that prisons might actually create more delinquency, and this whole thing about power and knowledge being like all mixed up, heavy stuff. But how does this actually show up in our, everyday lives? It still feels kind of abstract.
It's true. Foucault's ideas can seem, I don't know, kind of up in the air, but they're actually rooted in very real practices. Like, he talks about the development of what he calls disciplinary techniques, these like subtle methods for shaping how we act, creating those docile bodies we were talking about. And these techniques, they're everywhere.
Okay, lay it on me. What are some examples of these disciplinary techniques?
One of the, I think, most obvious ones is the timetable. Think about how our lives are structured, right? Yours, mine, by schedules. I mean, from the moment we wake up to when we go to sleep, school, work, even just like relaxing. It's all organized around these rigid timetables.
Yeah, true. I never really thought of it like that. But it's like we're always on the clock in some way. But that's just about, being efficient, right? Making sure everything runs smoothly.
It's about efficiency, for sure. But Foucault would say it's also about control, controlling our time, our movements, our like very existence even. The timetable. It's a way to like impose order, regulate behavior, make sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing when they're supposed to be doing it.
So it's not just like random Tuesday. It's Tuesday, 10.43, and I should be doing XYZ because that's what's on the schedule, and because it's everywhere, we internalize it.
Yeah.
We become our own, like, timekeepers.
Exactly. And it's not just the timetable. Foucault also talks about other disciplinary techniques, like this meticulous control of, movement and posture. Think about like military drills, or the way we're taught to sit still in school, or even the way office chairs are designed, ergonomically. It's all about shaping our bodies, making us fit the demands of the system.
It's like we're being like molded into these ideal workers, ideal students, ideal citizens, always productive, always obedient.
Right. And then there's this constant examination, evaluation, from, standardized tests in school to performance reviews at work. We're constantly being judged, measured, ranked. And that determines everything. Access to opportunities, our social standing, even our, like, sense of self-worth.
It's like this constant pressure.
Yeah.
To, like, prove ourselves, measure up. So these disciplinary techniques, they're not just about being more, efficient or organized, right? They're about creating a certain type of person, someone who fits in the existing power structure.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's not always like conscious.
Yeah.
or deliberate. These techniques, they often work on this really subtle level, shaping us, our behavior, even who we are, without us even knowing it.
Which is honestly kind of terrifying when you really think about it, because if we don't even know we're being controlled, how do we fight back?
That's the challenge Foucault leaves us with, right?
Yeah.
He argued that resistance, it's not about some big revolution, it's not about overthrowing the system from the outside. It's about recognizing those, those subtle ways that power operates on us and figuring out how to disrupt them from within.
So it's about like those little acts of defiance, those moments where we choose not to conform. But how do we even begin to do that when these systems are like so deeply a part of everything we do?
It starts by seeing it, right? By questioning the things we take for granted, like why are things structured this way? What are the like power dynamics underneath it all? Whose interests are being served here?
So like instead of just blindly following the schedule, maybe we ask, well, why are things scheduled this way? Or instead of freaking out over performance reviews, we focus on doing work that, feels meaningful, even if it doesn't fit in those like predetermined boxes.
Exactly. It's about finding the cracks, the moments where we can, be ourselves, our own values, our own desires. It's about remembering that we aren't just like cogs in a machine. We can think critically, we have agency, we can resist.
It's like taking back our own lives,
Eh,
our own minds from this subtle control that we've gotten so used to. That's a powerful idea, but I'm not gonna lie, it's a little intimidating too.
It is. It's a lifelong process, really. And there's no like easy answers, but the very act of questioning, of resisting, of trying to create even these like little pockets of freedom within these systems, that's where it starts.
So for those of us listening who are, maybe just starting to get all of this, what's the one thing you would want us to take away from this whole deep dive into Foucault?
Don't ever stop questioning and never stop thinking critically about the world, about how power works, and about your place in it all. Because that awareness, that willingness to question and challenge, that's the first step towards any kind of real change in our own lives and the world around us.
A lot to think about today. If you're anything like me, you're probably feeling, I don't know, you just got like schooled by Foucault,
Yeah.
but like in a good way. Because his work, it's about giving us the power to see the world more clearly, to understand the forces that shape our lives, and to resist the forces that try to limit us, limit our freedom, our potential. So until next time, keep questioning, keep resisting, and keep diving deep.